everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. We'll get started in just a minute as we have a few more people joining us, but very, very happy to have you here. Right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jamila Blake, she, her. I'm a project manager here at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. I serve as the Community Engagement Manager for the STEM Resource and Evaluation Center. Very excited to be hosting this webinar today in coordination with MN Associates. This is going to be an hour-long webinar focusing on evaluation TA discussion and generation of knowledge exchange. Today's topic is two researchers' perspectives on lessons learned and best practices for STEM programs. And I'll go ahead and turn things over to Nina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nina Della Salas with MN Associates. And to start us off, we have a quick poll for you. Please answer the following using the options provided. What is your role in your STEM project? And which track is your STEM project in? So how are we doing in responses?
We are at about 70% at this point.
Okay. Give you a few more moments. Okay. How are we now? Can we put out to the poll?
We can probably go ahead and close it.
All right, it looks like a great distribution here with a number of PIs and co-PIs and also others. And I'm assuming others would be project staff, right? Okay. So we'll be brief in a lot of introductions to allow for time for the speakers and Q&A. We also have additional 15 minutes. As Jamila said, this is an hour, but we do have an extra 15 minutes after the wrap up and survey for anyone who wants to ask questions more specific to their grant and evaluation needs. We will record this session and we'll post slides, resources, and the recording link as soon as we can, usually within a week. Before we get going, let's go quickly through some logistics to help us better facilitate this session. Please keep your microphone on mute when not speaking. And at any time, you can write your questions in the chat. To help us to get to know one another, please rename yourself to include your institution name or abbreviation and share your pronouns as you wish. Closed captioning, and as you see here, ASL translation is available. Thank you so much for our translator. And also, if you'd like to follow along with your own copy of the slides, you can access them on our website, and we will provide the link in the chat. Next slide, please. So this discussion and exchange is hosted by the AAAS STEM Resource and Evaluation Center, or thankfully REC for short. AAAS founded the REC with an award from the National Science Foundation in fall 2022. The REC seeks to cultivate a network of STEM stakeholders and to promote the exchange of ideas, resources, opportunities, and knowledge related to supporting academically talented STEM students with unmet financial needs. The REC carries out many activities, which aims to increase the effectiveness of the STEM portfolio, as well as build the capacity of STEM programs, PIs, and scholars. Emin Associates is a partner of the REC, and we provide evaluation technical assistance support to current and prospective STEM awardees. You can find more information and resources on the REC website. We encourage you to join the REC listserv and to receive a monthly newsletter if you aren't already in the mailing list. Next slide, please. So we encourage you to stay connected with us at the STEM REC. And you see here our website, and you could join our mailing list, and please follow us on social media. Now, to Kavita.
Thanks so much, Nina. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today and taking the time this afternoon or maybe this morning for some of you. I'm Kavita Mittapalli, CEO of Emin Associates, Inc., here with Nina, as Nina just introduced herself, and also with Stephen Petritis, who is also at M&A. We are evaluators of several STEM grants and, as Nina mentioned, the evaluation technical assistance providers for the AAAS STEM REC. So today, I'm really excited to introduce two incredibly talented social science researchers who have graciously agreed to join today's webinar, Dr. Cameron Sublett and Dr. Will Tyson. We could go to the next slide. So while these brief intros don't fully capture their expertise, I'd like to highlight a few key points about each of them. Dr. Sublett is an associate professor in the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies department at the University of Tennessee Knoxville, where he directs the Education Research and Opportunity Center. His research focuses on policies and practices that strengthen student pathways from community colleges to the workforce, supported by organizations such as the National Science Foundation, IES, Institute of Education Studies at the Department of Education, and the US Department of Education itself. Cameron's work appears in top academic journals, and he brings nearly a decade of leadership expertise from Santa Barbara City College, an award-winning Hispanic Serving Institution, or an HSI. He also serves as a social science researcher for Track One Project at Feather River College, California. So I believe we have the PI from FRC, that is Anna. Hi, Anna. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Dr. Will Tyson is a professor of sociology at the University of South Florida with a focus on STEM education and workforce pathways. Over 19 years, he has led NSF-funded research totaling almost $13 million, including the Path Tech series and projects like the Track 3 Turnpike STEM initiative with Pole State College. As an author and advisor for numerous grants, his work on CTE programs, career and technical education programs, explores how students gain the skills needed for STEM careers. Next slide, please. So in today's fishbowl discussions, we will explore a range of engaging topics, beginning with the panelists' backgrounds, inspirations, and personal connections to the current STEM programs. We will then dive into recent work and findings, highlighting the tools, methods, and resources they have utilized. The conversation will address the challenges they have encountered while conducting research, alongside emerging questions and new inquiries shaping their current focus. Finally, we will discuss the broader implications of their research, the significance of their findings, and their approaches to dissemination, ensuring their work informs and inspires the STEM education and research community. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sublett and Dr. Tyson. Over to you, Nina. You're on mute.
So I just want to make sure that you all are getting started. So I'm going to turn things over to Will and to Cameron. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. Excuse me. How's everybody? Hope everybody's doing well today. Cameron, good to meet you.
Likewise, likewise.
All right, so we're going to be going back and forth here and having a conversation. So I'll start out asking you, could you share a little bit about your background and how it relates to the experiences of STEM scholars, and over time, how's this shaped your research, particularly with first generation students?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would just begin by thanking everyone for inviting me to be here. I hope I can add something to the work that you're all doing, which I have tremendous respect for. As you heard, my name is Cameron Sublett. I'm an associate professor at UTK, where I'm also the director of the Education Research and Opportunity Center. Just a little bit about my center as a way of answering the question. In addition to producing policy relevant P through 20W research myself and in partnership with my faculty of affiliates, we are also home to 5 federal TRIO grants. Every one of them is focused on increasing post-secondary access and success for East Tennesseans. We're very proud of that work. So we, in addition to doing research on this subject, have our sleeves rolled up and are very much in the trenches doing the work. And we see the impacts and the importance of this work on a daily basis. We have 3 traditional upward bound programs, and then we have an EOC program, which serves adults looking to get into post-secondary study, and we have a veterans upward bound program that's seeking to support students after they transition out of the military. For myself personally, like I think many of you on the call, for me, research is me search. I grew up in a rural community. I grew up low income, and I'm a first generation student. So I meet all of the TRIO characteristics and all of the STEM population characteristics that our work is focused on. So I very much bring a personal lens to the work that I do. In addition to that, there certainly is a workforce development need in this focus area. We definitely do need to grow the number and diversify the pipeline of STEM scholars. So there's an economic exigency for me, and there's also a personal connection. So I'm very motivated in this work, happy with what I'm doing. And I'm really also always excited to connect with people like you, Will, that are doing similar work, have similar backgrounds, bring similar passions to the table, because after a while you do this research and you wonder, is anybody else kind of like connecting with this? Is it just me? So it's nice to realize you're not on an island. So, thanks for asking the question, Will. I think I would probably throw the question right back at you. What's inspired you to focus on STEM programs in your research? Do you have a personal connection or motivation driving the work?
Yeah, so I'll go in a little bit into my background. I also grew up in a rural area in Tarboro, North Carolina, eastern part of the state. Both my parents are teachers, were teachers. They're both long retired, although my mom still substitute teaches every now and then. And so I grew up in education and grew up, that being a kind of foundational part of our family. I was always a smart kid in math and science, took the highest math courses, took the highest science courses before STEM was a acronym. And then actually attended the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics for my last 2 years of high school, where I engaged with a lot of other very bright, talented kids in STEM from all over the state. I didn't go into STEM as a career, but I brought that quantitative analytical framework into sociology. And at the time, I also majored in psychology. And so, I went and got my undergraduate degree in sociology and psychology, and then went right over to grad school and got my PhD in sociology. And I was motivated. Well, after a time, I realized kind of the light bulb clicked on. I was like, hold up, I can just study education for my career. And so at that time, I was more focused on the social dimensions of higher education. So my dissertation looked at interracial friendship formation during the first year of college. And then I got a postdoc here at USF on an NSF grant, looking at student pathways, and STEM pathways through high school and higher education. And, that it just all of a sudden kind of came full circle. It's like, oh, I'm studying students who made a different choice than I did, or who made the same choice that who switched out of STEM at some point in their career. And looking back, going to the North Carolina School of Science and Math is what convinced me that I was not a STEM scholar, because you take multivariate calculus and you get a sense of, okay, this is a little bit outside of my depth and interest. And I will leave this to folks who know what they're doing. So I had a high kind of STEM identity, also appreciation for the field, but also an understanding that I could kind of serve that by understanding the challenges, hardships, and overall pathways that students go through to get into these fields. So in a lot of ways, I'm quite similar to the STEM students themselves, although I recognize a lot of the opportunities that I had throughout my life. I'm not a first generation. I wasn't a first generation student, mostly because my parents went to North Carolina A&T and Winston-Salem State, HBCUs in the triad, and because they were the youngest in their families, and they were the first ones to go to college because their brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, worked hard to pave a pathway for them. And so I recognized that advantage that I had, and that parlayed into the advantage of having two teachers, as my parents, who instilled these educational values for me at an early age. And while we were still a household of two teachers, so not an upper class household by any stretch, I had a comfortable upbringing in a small town. And so I'm highly motivated to make sure other talented kids have the advantages that they need in order to succeed. And I'm also highly motivated to learn about career pathways. It's funny, it kind of clicked for me. I was just at, both of my high school reunions last month. And, I was asking people, oh, what are you doing now? Da, 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 da. And, my science and math reunion, I was asking people, asking everybody this. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. This is what I do for a living. I study career pathways of people who are talented in STEM. And this is like doing like longitudinal work many years down the road when I only get, a few years in my own research. Yeah, so.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So I got the next question here for you then, Will. So you've obviously written extensively about kind of career pathways like you were just mentioning. So can you tell us on the call a little bit more about your book, Teaching and Learning, Employability, Skills, and Career in Tech Ed, Industry, Educator, and Student Perspectives from 2020? How do some of the studies in the book inform the generation of knowledge within STEM research?
Well, it's this book right here. And right here. So this book is taken out of my first grant as a PI, which is funded through the NSF Advanced Technological Education Program. If you're not familiar with that program, it focuses on community college technician education programs. And I've been funded through the Applied Research in Technician Education program that basically funds researchers at four-year universities like myself to conduct research on elements of the community college technician education experience. But this book actually isn't about community college students. That project was a holistic look at pathways in the Tampa Bay area. And so this paper looks at actually high school students in career and tech ed programs and how they learn employability skills within their courses, but also how they're taught by teachers and how these skills are desired in industry. And some of the big takeaways from this book and the I'll say forthcoming sequel, because I still have to do quite a bit of work on it, is that industry leaders in this area, and this reflects what I've heard nationally, are really excited about the prospects of students, young workers who are coming out of high school, who are in community colleges, who are in four-year universities, who have strong employability skills, personal responsibility, work ethic, teamwork skills, good social skills, leadership and conflict resolution skills, to enter into the workforce and start their careers without a bachelor's degree. And we see this within the STEM program with emphasis on internships and the challenges within the STEM programs, and parlaying this into my STEM work a little bit. But the challenges a lot of these students face in transitioning out of kind of the type of jobs we associate with students attending college: retail, hospitality, food service jobs, into jobs that actually are a pathway into their career. And so obviously paid internships is one way to do it, but this book talks about ways that students can enter into these kind of good tech jobs while enrolled in college, or between high school and college, in order to get a foot in and actually start their careers. So, Cameron, can you describe some of your recent work and some of your findings? And I'm particularly interested in what surprised you the most and what did you find particularly compelling?
Yeah, so outside of the STEM work that I'm supporting with Anna on the call, a lot of my work right now is kind of falling into two buckets that are in line or dovetailing with two kind of national, even international exigencies, but certainly national exigencies here. The first is AI, and the second one is on climate change. So I recently was awarded a 3-year grant to study the intersection of AI, workforce automation, and sub-baccalaureate CTE. And that one's in partnership with Advanced CTE, ACTE, and the Tennessee Board of Regents. The first year of that project, which we're in the midst of right now, is largely empirical. We're focused on two big deliverables. One is what we're calling kind of the landscape scan. It's essentially like an authoritative white paper on the subject. There's a lot of anecdotes, as you know, around AI. It's going to take your jobs. It's going to create jobs. It's not, all sorts of things that people are hearing around the water cooler and on the internet and on TikTok. What we're trying to do is identify the authoritative experts at the conversation. So let's talk to the folks at MIT that are making the tech and the AI, but let's also talk to labor economists that know something about the relationship with technological innovation, employment from past innovations. Let's also talk to state Perkins coordinators. Let's talk to advocacy organizations like Lumina. And let's try to put together kind of a compelling narrative. A second deliverable in this project that we're looking for in the first year is a student level quantitative analysis to ascertain the degree to which students are funneled or are participating in CTE pathways that may be at greater or lesser risk of automation. And so that involves us taking their educational pathways identified by SIP codes and then merging that into SOC codes. And then we have a novel measure of automation risk by SOC code. So through that crosswalking process, we're able to kind of do a first of its kind analysis to see if there's things like gender, racial, income stratification into at-risk occupations uh, at risk to AI. And that's really exciting. But then the second and third years of that project are technical assistance focused. We have folks from TBR colleges coming to UTK to engage in a community of practice that's going to last 2 years. And that community of practice is going to focus on reconceptualizing, re-engineering syllabi to be AI ready. So that's really fun work we're working on right now. I'm continuing to do a lot of work to serve and lift up the experiences of rural students, and this connects directly to the STEM project. Tennessee is home to a great number of rural learners. We serve a good number of them in our TRIO grants. So I've recently published a paper kind of looking at the degree to which students from rural communities study at rural colleges, and then what CTE pathways they pursue in relation to the occupations in their proximal area. Um, I I think the things that are standing out to me most right now are just kind of what I'm learning around AI. I should say a third bucket that I'm focusing on right now, climate change, is also really fascinating stuff too. We're learning about the ways in which community colleges really are going to be these drivers of a climate-ready workforce. So I'm really excited by the work I'm doing today. There's also intersection there too, right? The conversations of AI and climate action accelerated through community colleges and rural low-income learners need to be kind of connected and synthesized because that certainly overlap. If we want to continue to, encourage economic mobility for students, we need to make sure that they are trained in the newest and latest technologies along with social policies like climate change. So back at you, Will. What tools, methods, and resources do you use to collect and analyze data for your research?
First of all, a quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
The SOC codes at risk for
Yeah.
automation. How did you put that together? Like,
Oh, yeah.
that seems like a challenge.
Let's go into the weeds on this one because this is actually really fascinating, and I think the dorks on the call will really like this, and I count myself amongst you. So
I am too.
yeah, right. So it actually turned into kind of a standalone paper we ended up writing. We partnered with a brilliant assistant professor at the University of Georgia. His name's Jiang Park, and he's recently advanced a new automation index tied to AI. Basically, what he's done is gone into ONET, and ONET classifies, has its own SOC code system. And then what it does is it takes an individual SOC and disaggregates it into skills. And then what you can do is ascertain the degree to which the skills within a given SOC correlate with the skill capabilities of AI presently and see what is the correlation. That said, in our research and in writing this paper, we realized that there are a good number of existing AI automation measures out there. There's one, for example, that was advanced many years ago in 2011 by Asamoglu and Otter out of MIT. Asamoglu, by the way, just won the Nobel Prize this year. And there was another one that was in 2021 by a gentleman named Felton, and his was an automation exposure by SOC. And I'm seeing in the chat the question, what does SOC stand for? SOC stands for Standard Occupational Classification, and that is the standard way that the Bureau of Labor Statistics organizes all of the 867 occupations in the US economy by coding structure. So to answer your question, Will, there's actually not one right or wrong. We just submitted a paper for peer review, basically walking researchers through the existing measures of AI automation disruption, because there's benefits and there's drawbacks to each one. We essentially advocate that researchers maybe make use of a plurality of them. And we connect it also to, for institutional researchers out there doing things like the comprehensive local needs assessment right now, right? They're wanting to ascertain the degree to which there's local demand for a given CTE pathway that's required. They have to do that now, right? But what if they're trying to build in demand while also accounting for AI disruption? If they use Lightcast data, right, formerly known as MZ and Burning Glass, those data build in automatically Frey and Osborne's index of automation, of AI automation. And we think that's a good thing because it's readily available to institutional researchers with access to Lightcast. But we also, in our paper, show the degree to which that particular method is flawed methodologically and has been critiqued historically for some of its methods. And so we say that's not a bad thing inherently. We applaud Frey and Osborne for their tremendous work, but here's some other indices you might want to also consider.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. It's a really good answer and really interesting work. And maybe we'll chat offline about some of your work with the Lightcast data.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm kind of getting into that a little bit myself.
Let's do it. But
To get into the question that you asked me
yeah,
about tools, methods, and resources that I'm using to collect and analyze data. My best answer for this is whatever's available. I consider myself a mixed methods scholar, not because I am an expert in quantitative analysis or an expert in qualitative analysis, but because I am willing to do whatever needs to be done to address the question at hand, with whatever data is available, and I'm not particularly wed to one way or the other. Early in my career, I considered myself more quantitative because that was my training from my undergraduate research in my graduate school. And then I happened to, come to USF as a postdoc and then get hired into a department that's heavily qualitative and also work in a mixed methods research team. So I picked up a lot of qualitative skills along the way. And so more of my work now is qualitative than when I first started out. And a lot of that's because when I started out working in STEM education, I was using Florida Department of Education K through 20 education data warehouse data, which is, large state data, some of the best state data if you can get your hands on it, which is why I don't use it as much now. And actually that motivated me to conduct a national survey of community college tech programs and, collect my own quantitative data. So now I do a lot of survey research because, again, that was what was necessary to answer the question. Because the type of data that I want to use involving community college STEM students, it just really doesn't exist. So basically, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to address the question. So Cameron, can you tell me about evidence-based practices in your work and kind of how that factors into your broader STEM work?
Yeah, so the STEM project I'm supporting at Feather River College really focuses on the barriers, alleviating the barriers that rural students face to STEM pathways. And so we began as a team really identifying the core issues at stake here. What is it about rural students in the area that prevent them, serve as barriers for them accessing and succeeding in STEM? So big kudos to the PI on the grant, Professor Anna Thompson, who's on the call. She knows her students well, so she was able to speak intimately on their behalf. They face things like challenges getting to school because of inclement weather. They face things like insufficient internet or poor internet quality that might hamper their abilities to learn at a distance. They face barriers related to income, financing higher education, right? Having work responsibilities. They also face unique barriers at Feather River College in that athletics oftentimes compete with learning and academic pursuits. So we built a program, an intervention from kind of a solid understanding of what the specific barriers these students experience. And then I took that information and put together a theoretical kind of framework, right? Let's begin here with, on the left-hand side of our construct, these are the barriers, these are the challenges. What does the research say about best practices that would help students overcome these barriers? Well, for example, on the issue of transportation, right? How can we, make it easier for students to get to campus by changing bus schedules or something like that, or changing the times in which classes are made available. On the subject of, STEM identity is a big barrier for rural students. They don't know folks working in STEM. They don't know what kind of careers are available to them. So we've created a sort of an opportunity where we zoom in STEM experts to come and meet with the STEM scholars in the program. So I think to answer your question, to put a fine point on it, is just, I think for us, it was really identifying, not from a general perspective, but a very specific instance and very specific to the context in which our STEM program was based. What are the barriers our students experience? So, to you now, Will. So, what new questions or areas of inquiry would you like to explore further in STEM research?
Yeah, thanks. Well, a lot of what you talked about really gets into some of the new questions that I would like to address. I think a message that kind of why we're here, and a message to folks in the STEM and broader STEM like community, is that there are folks like us who do this work that complements the work that you do to better understand the challenges that your students face. But not only your students, like studying like the organizational structure of departments and kind of broader pathways, broader challenges in these disciplines. There are experts like us who do this work. There's literally like thousands of people like us. I'm usually the only sociologist at a STEM education or NSF meeting, but there I can go to ASA and there's literally thousands of people with the talent and ability to do this work. But call me first if you call me. So new questions and inquiry. I'm also really interested in STEM identity, because I think that's something that comes easier for some than others. Like I said, I was always good at math and science, and people always told me I was good at math and science, and so I had that identity regardless of challenges that I faced. And when I haven't faced challenges in my career, it was a strong identity saying like, well, I am a sociologist. So, passing my quals is something that I'm going to do. Completing my dissertation proposal and my dissertation is something that I'm going to do. But if you don't have that strong STEM identity, then there may be less internal motivation, but also less external motivation that gets you to complete your pathways. It's easy for students who may not necessarily feel like a scientist to say, you know what, I can do something else and be successful. And so we need to kind of fill those kind of perhaps gaps in confidence, but also gaps in support to help our students succeed. I want to learn more about the infrastructure for students, both their infrastructure in their departments and their infrastructure outside of their academic structure that supports them. So their social networks, their jobs. So, what are they doing outside of school that promotes that STEM identity and encourages them to succeed?
Excellent. Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Kavita, do you have a couple questions for both Will or Cameron?
Yeah, so I was thinking, well, thanks so much for this discussion. Very, very interesting. I wish we had a lot more time the whole day to talk about this, right?
Yes, because we could all geek out with what you all are talking about.
So one of the things that I was wondering if either of you could share, what are some of the implications of your findings for the future of STEM research and perhaps even program implementation?
So I'll go ahead and take that one first, if you don't mind, Cameron.
Please.
So I have two roles within STEM. One is as a co-PI on the Turnpike project that's out of the University of South Florida in collaboration with Polk State College, that's looking at community college transfer into USF engineering. I'm also a co-PI on an STEM hub, the Community College STEM network that is based out of Rutgers. And so I'm looking at this from the perspective of a specific university, but and transfers into that university, but also looking at community college transfer more broadly. I want to talk a little bit about some of the early research that we've done and how I feel like it can enhance our understanding of STEM pathways, but also STEM student recruitment. One of the challenges that we have with the Turnpike project, and also that I hear a lot of other projects have, is recruiting students. And I think from the perspective of faculty, a scholarship should be sufficient. The NSF said, well, look, we're giving students $10,000, $15,000. Of course they'll do that. But it's important to understand that if you're a student who's making, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 a year in your job, $15,000 is a pay cut. And understanding how students use their scholarship funds to enhance their educational progress and potential for attainment is really important in selling this prospect to students, because being in STEM can be a dramatic change for a lot of students. It's not what they're used to. It's not what other people are doing. So, dropping from working 40 hours to 20 hours, or from 30 hours to 15 hours, or not working at all can be a significant change for students. So just real quickly, we did interviews and focus groups with some of our Turnpike scholars and found four main themes in terms of how they use their scholarship funds. First was to optimize work-school life balance, to increase their financial safety net, to reduce commuting costs, and to address family, medical, and financial emergencies. So in terms of work-school life balance, they were able to drop their hours. Almost all the students we talked to, said that they were dropping down from 30 to 40 hours to part-time or not working at all so they could take a full load. And so now they have more time to study. They have more time to engage with classmates. They have more time for study groups. They have more time for the STEM activities, which aren't mandatory, of course, but they're highly encouraged. So they're able to show up for biweekly meetings on Friday afternoons. They're able to, meet with project staff. They're able to, do the mentoring, so they're able to get that advantage. They also use that money to, for utilities, essentials, bills, books. They use that money to, provide a, little bit of safety net for themselves when things come up. They, some of them put the money into savings. This student said, hey, some money to fall back on if something does hit the fan. A lot of them use it to reduce commuting costs, whether it is buying a car, paying for gas, or moving on campus, which again allows more engagement. And then they also use it for family emergencies. A lot of these students are in unstable financial situations at home, or, are in a position where they're supporting obviously their own children and spouse, or they're supporting their parents or other family members. So they can't just do that by being a good student. They need the money in order to do that. And so it allows the students to treat school as a job. That's something that you tell students, right? Treat this as a job, thinking about what your job can be and your income can be after you get a bachelor's degree. But this allows students to treat their schooling as a job now and get paid now and get the benefits of having that money now in order to prepare them for a career. So I think that those findings can help shape the pitch for students and also help keep them motivated and staying in the STEM program. So that's just one example.
Yeah, I would really have little to add to that. I would just echo kind of the sentiments that money isn't the only barrier that students face going into higher education. So it's not as simplistic as just paying kids to go to college. You know, there's the STEM identity issue, opportunity costs, right? With that said, the surveys, interviews, focus groups I've been doing in partnership with my FRC colleague, Anna Thompson on the call, is that the STEM program has made a material difference in the lives and academic trajectories of the students participating in it. So now looking beyond access, which is what Will is focusing on towards now, like involvement and participation. You know, there's a good number of students, STEM scholars at FRC, who credit the program to helping them find their way. Many of them kind of were kind of unsure of their curricular or academic pathway, didn't really have a career plan mapped out, but then participating in the STEM program has provided them with clarity and guidance. They're getting one-on-one tutoring and mentorship from Anna, and it's clarified paths for them. So it's making a material difference once they're in. But you know, I think that goes back to the theoretical model that Anna and I advanced at the outset. We had a deep understanding of what the needs were of the students and the barriers they face, not only getting into, but then persisting through STEM pathways at FRC.
Cool, thank you so much. Not sure if we have time for another question, so maybe we could jump to some of the questions that have been raised already, if that's all right. And just a very quick follow-up to what Cameron and Will said about their respective PIs and their STEM projects. Last year, I think in September or October, we had a webinar with the PI of FRC, Dr. Anna Thompson, and also the PI of Turnpike Project, Dr. Sanjukta Banja. The recordings are already available on the website, so if you're interested, then you can corroborate what the researchers are saying, and then some of the lessons learned and good practices from their grants as well. So if we could jump to the question, Nina, would you like to?
Yes.
Yeah.
So actually, this is great because you all have such rich personal histories. And I think this and what you're sharing also in your research prompted Fanny Silvestri to ask, is there a guest speakers database per discipline, like a YouTube playlist or the TED Talk website, not to replace the live events in our community college, but could increase the diversity of role models for our students and also increase their out-of-state curiosity? So this is for recording of their talks, not to, you know, personally reach out to them. So if anyone, so not just Cameron or Will, but anybody who has an idea, please feel free to jump right in on the chat or turn your mic on, and we can communicate that way as well. Any ideas? Do you all have, so actually kind of to follow up, is anyone like have like a, you know how it is when you have career day and in universities or bringing, you know, what were some of the kind of compelling speakers or featured presenters that you've seen that has kind of an impact on, you know, STEM students?
Well, I think Anna could probably speak to that because she's done a tremendous effort identifying, curating a list of speakers. I don't want to put her on the spot though, because but I will say that one, we've talked about one group of speakers to bring in are STEM faculty at proximal 4 years, so that the students can better learn and understand what the type of research that faculty member is at. For example, for Feather River, Cal State University Chico, which is probably the nearest proximal 4-year institution. Having those folks come in over Zoom and meet with students and share about their research and opportunities for research assistantships and stuff like that. I think that is one way to kind of bridge the divide between the 2-year and 4-year for students, and can have big impact.
Okay. And thank you. I see Chandra Turpin has also listed 2 resources, the American Association of Physics Teachers and also an early career scholars page from Dr. Fatima. So those are great resources there. So feel free to save the chat, and so you can save that information. Anybody else? Then I would say Kavita, Will, Cam, or is there anything that you wanted to follow up on, questions we didn't get to ask when, like, for example, we were talking about how do you disseminate your wonderful work? So Will's showing his book. Cameron, you mentioned a lot of papers. Where do you disseminate them besides, of course, this wonderful, seminar and a discussion exchange we're having here?
And especially keeping in mind the STEM population audience, right?
Yeah.
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 That's certainly a challenge, because, I'll be honest. I don't like publishing in journals, honestly, for various reasons. Reviewer number two, or just the fact that, like, who's going to read them, the stilted way of writing, and is it going to reach the audience? And look, I got promoted to full professor, so I don't really need to do that as much anymore. So I'll be honest. So this is my preferred dissemination method, really just talking to people and kind of walking through the main thrust of the findings and communicating in a way that can make sense to folks. And so yeah, that's more my preferred method, but we do need to do a better job of figuring out how to reach as many people as possible, because one thing that we obviously need for evidence-based practices is the evidence. And a lot of scholars who put forth that evidence, who do the research, aren't really good at promoting our work. I may not look like it, but I'm quite bad at self-promotion. So we need to do better about, having a social media presence, or, showcasing the research that we're doing, or, the reports that we do for our partners and clients or whatever, figuring out how to take that more broadly. Because, there's plenty of misinformation out there, and we need to do more research and good information to counter that and really get the discussion centered around actual evidence.
Okay. And so this will be our last. Yeah.
There's another question in the
Yeah,
chat.
there's a lot. Yeah, there's a good question here, and I want to ask before we kind of switch gears. So I would love to. So this is from Molly Haynes. I would love to hear more from the speakers about how they leverage their rural identities to their STEM projects from a recruitment perspective. So it's a great question. Thanks, Molly.
Cameron, I'll let you take that one.
Oh, that's gracious of you. Yeah, I can't really put my finger on it. Although, I grew up in rural Alabama, so I didn't know the terms STEM identity, and I didn't know the terms barriers, but I lived it. And so those things were kind of in the back of my consciousness as a kid, like, why isn't this so easy? Why, stuff like that. But then, going through and getting a formal education, and then being at the table with Anna when we had the opportunity to design this project, by that point I had learned enough about, well, what are the actual names for the experiences I had as a young person. And so I was sure to bake those in and reflect on my own experience growing up, right? Like, I didn't have, parents that, had ever gone to college. My dad is a plumber. My mom was in and out of employment because of addiction. And so, I was like, well, I didn't have any role models. I just kind of had to make it up. And so that connects to the academic literature around self-efficacy, self-perception. And so we dipped into that literature. I had worked at a community college for over a decade by the time we were writing our STEM. So I knew at that point, there's a host of financial barriers. And, I'll say this too, to flip the question around towards a positive direction. There's a lot of discussion around rural deficits, but there's less discussion around rural assets. And that's an important component that needs to be a part of this conversation, is that rural learners actually bring a tremendous amount of assets to the table. They have strong communities, they have strong social ties, their churches, their places of faith lift them up and provide resources to them. And many rural families, though they didn't go to college, they actually prize and value the opportunity for college because they recognize the importance in increasing economic mobility. So I think it's important for all of us that do research and practice for rural learners to also acknowledge and cite and tap into the many assets that these folks bring to the table too. They're not statistically more or less likely to actually go to college than their non-rural counterparts, which I think is surprising to most people. They tend to think of rural students as being less likely to go, but they're actually not, statistically speaking. I think the larger issue is the fact that if you look at the population of rural communities, there's far less college degree representation among the population, and that's because of rural brain drain, so to speak, right? Like people get their degrees and their higher education, but then they leave their rural communities rather than staying there. That's an issue. But yeah, I guess just to put a point on it, it's just to also recognize the assets that these students and learners bring to the table too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the slide. And Kavita, I think you were
I
up
was
next.
going to add real quick to
okay,
that,
sure.
that as a researcher, coming from a rural background adds a bit of perspective, because you're able to understand a little bit about what rural students are going through. I remember when we had a meeting within the Turnpike program with prospective students from Polk County. If you don't know Florida geography, Polk County is the large, mostly rural, mostly rural, somewhat small town area between like basically Tampa and Disney World. And so that's kind of what you're going with. You could drive there and drive through Polk County, have no idea you're like, 30 minutes from the most magical place on earth. And so we were talking to students, they were talking about the prospect of coming to Tampa to go to USF. And one of the common themes was they'd say, I'm from, Winter Haven, or, I'm from this place or that place, these small towns, small cities in Polk County. And they would grossly overestimate how long it takes to get to Tampa. They're like, oh, I'm about 2 hours away from Tampa, about 2.5 hours from Tampa. And I'm, like, it's about like 90 minutes, it's about like an hour 15, maybe less. And so, but that's something that I could understand growing up in a small town, even in North Carolina, where we drive around a lot more than people do in Florida, is just that places that aren't that far away seem very far away. And this understanding of like moving to the big city. And folks who were faculty at USF or whatever, they may not even think about Tampa as a city, much less a big city, in the way that a student from rural Polk County would. And so it brings that level of perspective that a lot of faculty just don't have in terms of, thinking about recruiting and the services that they need to provide. Because they maybe haven't really had to think about transitioning like that into a big city campus environment.
Thanks. Thank you, Will. Rita?
Sure. I know that we spoke a little bit about EBPs, the evidence-based practices, and we had a webinar in July about this. So again, check out the website. So in a sense, what we are really trying to focus here is that we are building a repository of evidence-based practices as related to the STEM grant. So please take a minute, go to this website, and you will see there are 16 EBPs right now. So you go to the search button, just write the EBPs, and they will come right up. The only thing that you will find there is a list in the form of a Google Doc or an Excel sheet, which has the list of all the EBPs. And you can actually do a search through your college, your institution, library system, and then pull out the tools and measures that actually measure that EBP. The reason we don't have the tools and measures there is mainly because of the firewall and also the copyright issue, so we didn't want to get into trouble. But we do have the full citation, and we also make sure that these tools are validated, so you can adapt and adopt them as required. So, well, that's about it, Nina.
All right, can we have the next slide, Jamila? Thank you, Kavita.
Sure.
So as folks are trying to leave, I hope you get a chance to please take a few moments to complete the survey. You have the QR code there as well as the survey link that you see, and we'll post that also in the chat. And just to remind you, we really value your feedback because this gives us an opportunity to know what to put on next as a topic for exchange and discussion, and also what seems pertinent to your needs. So please take a moment to fill that out. We're gonna stop right here in terms of recording, but we'll still stay on, and this will give us an opportunity to have a little bit more less stilted conversation and perhaps address anything more specific with your grant or your evaluation or something related to the research that both Cameron and Will are doing. So feel free to take a moment to prep your questions and ask away. So thank you.